I like having an intro now for this show. It's so great. How y'all doing this morning?
Good. What's going on, Kyle?
Good.
Good
Good.
morning.
David,
Happy Football Sunday.
dude, I know week 3 is already upon us. It's crazy because, I feel like you're just waiting all off season, and then it's over in a blink of an eye. We're already in week 3. DFS Twins. I'm excited. I got my second lineup in the contest with you guys this week. I'm excited to see how I do this week. Started out fairly decent last week, and then everybody stopped scoring on me. So didn't do too well. Finished 9th in the group last week for my first outing. Hoping to do a lot better this week.
Yeah, in order to win last week, you needed to have that Tua, Waddle, Tyreek Hill stack. You got to have some part of that last week.
Yeah, you had to have that.
Or
and the ones that had that and Amon Ra are the ones that did the best.
Yep.
Exactly.
I mean,
that was one of the stacks we talked about on the show.
Yeah, it is.
Hill and Waddle.
They just gobbled up all the points.
Yeah.
Tony and I actually did a draft right after the show, and Tony had convinced me, and I got Waddle and Tyreek Hill in the draft and won that one easily. So thank you, Tony. You were a big help. I love the show.
If only I could. I got to apply the advice to my own lineup. What's up, Albert?
Albert over here in the house. What's up, buddy?
All right, I will take a quick bow since I didn't win last week amongst the three of us and the whole group.
Good job.
So Tony took week 1. I took week 2. The contest is growing, but I have a second and a first, so I'm in the lead for the year. Tony, I expect you to step up today.
What I like is that between the two of us, we won both weeks.
Yeah, we're dominating, definitely. So, Kyle, it's your turn to show.
But I did better than Tony last week, so
okay. Very good.
I'm not chopped liver, and I'm coming for you this week for sure. I feel really good about this lineup. I'm not gonna lie.
All right, I can't wait to hear it.
We'll get to that in just a little bit. First off, let's start off with some QB guys that you guys are liking this week. David, we'll kick it off with you, buddy.
Yeah, this is a week where I think there's a lot of receivers everyone's going to be excited about since they've been dominating. And QB might be a place people try to save money to be able to get them. I definitely think there's 3 or 4 key games that'll probably be the ones you have to target a quarterback from to have a chance this week. I think, obviously, the Bills and Dolphins is an exciting one. And ironically, in some ways, it's easier to convince yourself to take Tua than Allen just because the Dolphins defense is kind of intact and the Bills is decimated. It really feels a lot like last week all over again with Baltimore, where there are no starting cornerbacks for Buffalo. Everybody's a backup. And yet, they're going to score a lot of points and put pressure on the Dolphins to throw. So I definitely think Tua is an easy choice to go at this week at a reasonable price. He's 6,100. I think the Lions-Vikings game is another one that has shootout potential attached to it. It's an indoor game, no weather effects. So Cousins and Goff are both options. And then the other one that jumps out to me is that Washington-Eagles game. I don't know that I would trust Wentz at this point, but certainly Hurts is enticing. And you got to think the Commanders will put up a little bit of a fight and keep it interesting. So those are the 3 that really jumped out at me. The one other quarterback that I found myself making a lot of big tournament lineups with, because I just can't get myself to do it in cash. But Marcus Mariota, 5,500, the Falcons on the road against Seattle, but Seattle's not a very good team. And yet Atlanta's defense is not good enough to stop Seattle either. So he's sort of the cheap option I put out there, and I'll explain a stack that's very tempting with him later.
Tony, you got anything to add to QBs?
Yeah, I think there's a guy for me that jumps right out when I look at the QBs this week, and that's Jalen Hurts at 7,600. Just with the dual threat, he's a lock almost every week right now for a 25-point floor. So it depends from there if you want to spend up or spend down. I would almost go against what David said. I would almost prefer to spend up to Josh Allen. And part of the reason is because Stephon Diggs is only 7,700 on DraftKings. He should be at least $1,000 more on DraftKings. So it's kind of bargain for Stephon Diggs. And I really, kind of love him, obviously, in this matchup with the Dolphins. He's finished as the wide receiver one last week, and I think very easily could pick up where he left off. So I would almost kind of make an argument instead to spend up to Josh Allen. Another couple guys that I really like this week are Joe Burrow. Joe Burrow, I don't want to say he's a contrarian, but going up against that Jet defense, what has really troubled this Cincinnati offense is that cover two. And the Jets, through the first 2 weeks of the season, have been in cover two 1.7% of the snaps. So I'm not sure what Saleh's got kind of set up for today on that defense, if he's going to kind of transition them into a cover two. But I think Joe Burrow could light them up, the Jets, and I kind of like that stack, even if you were going to go with a double or triple stack with Jamar Chase and T. Higgins. And then another guy, kind of a sneaky guy, I think. Maybe sneaky is not the right word, but I like Cousins at home on a bounce back in that Detroit game. So he's another guy that I've got my eye on.
Yeah. One thing I would support in what you said, Tony, is this is the time of year where there's not a lot of games that have been played. So when you look at a guy like Burrow, you might be tempted to think he hasn't had that great of a year so far. He had all those interceptions week one. He couldn't really move the ball well against Dallas. But Dallas and Pittsburgh could be two of the toughest defenses he ever faces. And now up against the Jets. And my one fear always with the Jets is that they won't score enough points to force them to throw. But it seems like the Jets have a little more punch with Flacco in there and the receivers they have now. And so I could see that being a bit of a shootout game. So I agree with you on that. I think that Burrow at his price is very tempting.
Yeah, and look, this is the NFL. It's only a matter of time before they figure you out. So don't think for a second that these defensive coordinators are not looking at the Cincinnati offense and trying to crack that code with Jamar Chase. And I'm telling you that based on statistics, the cover two seems to be the way to attack them. And that's the one scheme that the Jets have not been utilizing for the first 2 weeks. So yeah, I'm both of us are on Burrow this week.
Yeah, and just about everybody you listed, I think I tested a lineup with at some point yesterday. I was like, okay, let's see what it looks like with Burrow in this stack, and let's see what it looks like with Hurts in this stack, and let's see what.
Well, I do a lot of what Dave just said, and I kind of
them all,
the past 2 weeks, but I'm trying to find a game that I want to tap into. Which game do you want to buy into? And
right.
So,
yeah, I think things I look for, I really like to get a home quarterback when I can. But if I can't get a home quarterback, I like to get a dome quarterback so I don't have to worry about wind or weather affecting things. And then you really want a game where you think the other team can score points as well. So sometimes it's exciting to get a quarterback you think is good, but if you can't get a opposing offense to put up points, they're just going to run it all day long. The one thing I would say about Diggs is I have a feeling the Dolphins defense and Xavier Howard is built into that price. And again, that's why I kept getting pulled back to Tua, because you get both Tyreek Hill and Waddle on backup cornerbacks. And I just can't imagine how Buffalo's going to stop that unless their pass rush is just brutal and Tua makes a lot of mistakes. But even if that happens, they fall behind in the game and they still have to throw. I just couldn't get around that I had to have Dolphins somewhere in my lineup this week. There just was no way around it.
Yeah. Let's see. We got a couple of QB questions over here in the chat. Let's hit those real quick. Would you stream Goff or Wentz or risk it and wait for Herbert?
I would not wait for Herbert's 4:00 game. There's a chance they decide it's just not worth risking him. So I don't think he's an option. I would do actually Goff in that case. I think he's against the lower level defense. It's indoors. It's going to be a shootout. And I think the Vikings are going to put up points on Detroit. So I would go Goff.
I agree. I'm all over Goff in that game. And Goff has been surprising this week. He's so far, he's a top 10 fantasy quarterback. So, don't shy away from Goff this week in that matchup.
I concur.
Well, he does have Herbert here. Like, what are your thoughts on Herbert? I know, Dave, you're the type of guy who doesn't like to risk. You want to play the sure thing.
Yeah, I don't see the positive to playing him. Keenan Allen's probably not going to play. It's a home game against Jacksonville. They'll probably try to run it a lot. And even if he starts, you don't know if he's going to finish. It could be one hit and he's out. And it's not like you're deciding between starting, Herbert or Geno Smith at this point. Goff has been putting up solid numbers and has some real weapons.
And just real quick, I just kind of pulled it up. Goff is the number 9 fantasy quarterback on the season so far through the first 2 weeks.
Yeah, pretty surprising, but I agree on Herbert too. Even if he plays, he's banged up, and I'm not sure that bodes well for your lineup. Zach Doxwell, that's interesting. No, and a 4-point passing TD, 6-point rushing. Would you play Burrow or Goff? I know we just talked about Goff, but I still got to go Burrow here. What do y'all
personally?
think?
I love Burrow in this matchup. It's all about the matchup this week for me against that Jet defense. Does not play that cover 2. I think Burrow gets on track to eat up that defense, and I think we could see both Chase and Higgins go off.
Yeah, I concur once again. So we're all on Burrow.
It's funny because I'm sure, Zach, when you drafted Burrow and Goff in before the season started, you probably picked Burrow as your QB1 and Goff as your bye week fill-in. And it's crazy that in week 3 we're questioning now, which of these two guys do we start?
Yeah, I've been reading a lot of those. I can't believe I'm starting Goff over Brady comments.
For real. Yeah,
right.
Whoever saw that coming.
And I said, just throw this out there too. I know I just said Goff is a number 9. Burrow is the number 11. So it's not like Burrow has totally fallen out and he's a number 3 quarterback. He still is a top end quarterback, and you got to roll with him against that Jet defense.
I will say that both come with a degree of risk, though, because there is every possibility Goff doesn't do as well because DeAndre Swift runs it a lot. And same thing with Burrow. If Mixon goes off and they get an early lead and they're winning most of the game, both of them have game scripts where they might not have big games. But I can't see them not wanting to get Burrow back on track. They're 0-2. I think they want a decisive win for their confidence.
Yeah. And just to kind of further that point, Dave, I did read this morning, or was it either last night or this morning, that there's word coming out of Detroit that they want to increase Swift's role in today's game. So we could see a heavy dose of Swift today.
Yep.
Well, I mean, his ankle should be better than it was last week. So, all right, speaking of running backs, let's move on to running backs. Tony, we'll let you go first this time. Hit us with some guys you like this week.
This is a spot where I kind of really struggled. I think there were 2 guys that jumped out at me immediately that I kind of had worked into my lineup and worked around them initially. And that's David Montgomery against that Houston defense. David Montgomery has been just an absolute volume monster in this offense with Chicago. I'm concerned about the Chicago offense. It's a very low volume passing offense, and so they do try to lean more heavily on that run. But I like his price point. He's $5,900, and I just think that he's a guy that you can get real value at the running back position. The other guy that I liked is Leonard Fournette, with kind of what David was just talking about with Brady, with that receiving core banged up. We could see Leonard Fournette carry the rock today, 30 times in this matchup against Green Bay. So we could see them lean heavily on Fournette. Again, $6,500 for Fournette, for a guy who is a true bona fide RB1. I really like the value on both of them. So I was looking to see if there was anybody that I was willing to spend up on, and maybe a Dalvin Cook or a Joe Mixon. I can make a case for either one of those 2 guys. Mixon, again, it's crazy the amount of work that this guy gets in that offense. And Dalvin Cook looking for a bounce back game against this Detroit defense, who's ranked dead last against the run. So I can make a case for either one of those. And then I looked at another guy, kind of take a page out of David's book, and that's Dameon Pierce. I'm not a big Dameon Pierce fan, but I think for the price point, $5,000 on DraftKings, I could make an argument that he's also a good value buy against this Chicago defense, which has been surprisingly porous against the run.
Yeah. David, what do you got to add there?
Yeah, I think if you look at most lineups, you're going to see a lot of Dameon Pierce and a lot of David Montgomery, that they jump at you as the easiest, obvious solution. And I bet you 95% of all lineups will have one of them. So
Probably the matchup is just fantastic for both.
The fact that Fields threw the ball 11 times last week, they do not want him to throw the ball. David Montgomery might as well be the quarterback of the Bears at this point for how little Fields has the ball in his hands. So I'm actually wondering if they try to change that up this week against a Houston defense at home. This might be the week we suddenly see Cole Kmet and Darnell Mooney do what they're supposed to do. I don't believe that enough that I would ever even consider putting them in my lineup. But this would seem like if you're going to test out Fields and try to boost his confidence, a good game for that.
Yeah.
So I did not have Montgomery in my lineup, but full disclosure, I hate that guy. I've had him in the past. He's made me sad. So
show me on this ball where he hurt you.
I also agree with Tony. I found myself putting Mixon or Cook in a lot of my lineups and pairing them with Pierce as a way to get a higher level running back. I keep waiting. It's been so receiver heavy all year. We just know there's going to be a couple running backs that go off, and I think this is the week. I actually told you about Mariota as a QB option, and when I went cheap on him, I put Jonathan Taylor in my lineup. It seems to me that's another one. Pittman being back. The Chiefs' defense is not that great. If I'm the Colts, I want to run it a lot and keep Mahomes off the field. He is $9,000. He is really expensive. So I had to find some cheap stuff to put with it when I did that lineup. And I only put it in a big contest because I thought that's kind of contrarian. I wouldn't do that in a cash game at this point. But that was the other way I went. Swift, as Tony was talking about, they're going to use him more. I think that's a shootout game. And again, I like him as well. But again, I couldn't get around having, Pierce in a lot of my lineups because of the cost. I was really excited at one point. Zamir White of the Raiders looked like an option this week, but Josh Jacobs did go to the game. He flew in separately, and he's going to test himself out before the game. So I just don't think it's a safe play. And the fact is, you don't know if it's him or Amir Abdullah. So I ended up staying away from that. But if you wanted to be a little crazy and throw a $4,000 running back in, that's a dart throw you could try.
Tony, you look like you wanted to add something there. Oh,
we lost just listening to Dave's takes.
Oh, I got you. It looked like you kind of was like.
No, I appreciate the unique perspective. I mean, in a good way.
But seriously, Pierce was so freaking cheap this week with that matchup that I wouldn't be surprised if everybody in our group has him in their lineup today.
Yeah, I have a decision whether to start him in a seasonal league over A.J. Dillon or not.
I have that exact same problem in like 3 or 4 leagues.
Yep. I got to tell you, I'm nervous about that Bucks-Packers game. That just seems like it should be a defensive slogfest. I don't know that either team has a healthy receiver. The only healthy Buccaneer receiver is Mike Evans, and he's suspended. And today or yesterday, they moved Cole Beasley onto the active roster. I don't think Gage is going to play. Julio's going to play. Godwin's going to play. That's going to be like a 1947 football game between the Bears and the Lions in the snow or something is what it's going to look like.
Lazard is off the report. He's off the injury report. And Cobb is going to play. At least he's trending that way. So he'll have Cobb and Lazard. But I don't disagree with you.
I'm sorry. Did you just say he's going to have Cobb? Like that changes things?
No, I think the problem, and I've talked about this earlier this week, David, is that, and I don't know if we talked about it, maybe last week we talked about it on DFS, is a lot of these quarterbacks, you look at Aaron Rodgers, and it's like these teams now have to make up for this abbreviated preseason, still getting snaps, still getting rhythm, still kind of building up that chemistry in this offense, trying to reestablish their identity. So I think it could be another week or two. I don't think we're going to see really improved play from Rodgers until we get into October. So I'm shying away from the Packers.
Yeah, well, and then on top of that, Watson is hurt now, who was starting to come on a little last game. And so, there's a lot of factors there. But I have no clue. Brady doesn't have an offensive line or receivers. I could picture Fournette having a game where he only has 50 yards rushing, but he has 12 catches.
Yeah, 100%.
Well, since we're talking receivers, let's go ahead and just keep on with that. David, who are some receivers you like this week?
It is a large menu of options this week. We have lots of specials.
Yes.
Certainly, you can never go wrong with Cooper Kupp or a Justin Jefferson, but they're all on the pricier side. I really found myself topping out in most cases, either with Tyreek Hill at 7,600 or AJ Brown at 7,300. But when you hit the 6,000s and the 5,000s, you still find a lot of guys you like. Gabe Davis, I'm really intrigued by. If he is playing today, he's still questionable, but was trending towards playing. It's going to be very tempting to play him because Diggs will have Xavier Howard on him. Gabriel Davis won't. I also told you I like Waddle and Hill, obviously. I'm on Rice St. Brown. Until the guy doesn't catch 8 balls in a game, I don't know how you don't put him in your lineup. And the Vikings did not look like they could stop anyone. Between Chase and Higgins, I kept picking Higgins. He was just much cheaper. And when you really look at the past year, they kind of go back and forth and sort of 50-50 the success rate. Higgins is really underrated. And at 6,100, I didn't know how I don't include him. I still love Curtis Samuel. He was great for me last week. He's only 5,100. I'm assuming that's because they're playing the Eagles, but I picture Darius Slay all over McLaurin and Samuel. They create ways to get him open. And so I don't know how you don't put him in your lineup. Garrett Wilson of the Jets seems to be trending in the right direction with the number of targets. I think he had 14 last week and just looked like he could do anything and everything. He looks like the next Justin Jefferson. And so as long as Flacco's quarterback, I can't see it being a mistake to play him, and he's only 5,400.
The next Justin Jefferson. That's high praise.
Especially a Michigan graduate calling an Ohio State receiver that. It was painful.
We'll see how that pans out. I'm going to write this down so when he isn't the next Justin Jefferson, I'll be like, bruh.
Okay. If he's not, it's because he's a Jet, not because he's, not Justin Jefferson. So,
Tony, what else do you got for us?
So again, I think I'm looking at the receiver position today and trying to look for value, but also guys that I might want to spend up on. Stephon Diggs continues to jump out at me just for his price point, 7,700. Guys, just I'm not too concerned about who's lined up against him. Between him and Allen, they're going to find a way to get it done. So I like Diggs. I also another guy too that I thought about spending up on is Devontae Adams against this Tennessee defense. I know he disappointed last week, but you can't move off a guy like Devontae Adams. The Tennessee defense looked like an absolute sieve last week against Buffalo. So he's a guy at 8,400 that if you're looking to spend up on a receiver, he kind of caught my eye. I think also, Amon-Ra St. Brown is difficult to pass on in this game against Minnesota. I know that we just talked about DeAndre Swift getting more involved in this game, but Amon-Ra St. Brown has definitely been a target monster. And I keep talking about this other receiver every week, and the target volume is just so strong for his price point, and that's Brandon Cooks at 5,800 against that Chicago defense. I continue to be drawn towards him in DFS because of his price point and the volume share that he gets in that passing offense. It's just 5,800 to me is a bargain for a wide receiver one. So those are some of the guys that I've been looking at. I would love to talk about Waddle and Tyreek Hill, but the Buffalo defense is just, it's a buzzsaw. So I'm nervous about starting any Miami players against that Buffalo defense, even after what they did last week.
Yeah, even if they are having troubles with their corners on D and everything, it doesn't matter. Like I'm staying away from that defense at all costs.
Yeah, but I do like Dave. I do like your take on Higgins and Chase. I get it. Either one of them is a tempting play this week against that Jet defense.
Yeah, AJB in the house over here says, F it, we'll do it live. I don't know what that means, but hey, I love it. Let's see. Zach wants to know, what are your thoughts on Mike Williams since Herbert might play now?
Again, it's a 4
I stayed
o'clock.
away from them Chargers
Yeah.
completely.
I think if you can wait till 4 o'clock to decide, and he's really the better receiver, and it looks like he's going to play, you can play him. I don't know that Chase Daniels is so terrible, but Williams is sort of more of a downfield threat a lot of times. So if you have a good other option, I would do it. But it's not the worst play.
The only guy I really feel comfortable leaning on going into that game is Gerald Everett.
Yeah.
Just
backup
because
quarterbacks love their tight ends too.
Because backup exactly, and he seems to be a favorite target, at least for now, for Herbert. So outside of Gerald Everett and maybe Eckler, I'm not sure that I want to lean on any of those Chargers receivers today until I know for sure what's happening with Herbert. And here's the other concern too is, the injury is legit. So he takes one shot, and we could see Herbert exit in the first or second quarter. So you've got to be a little bit nervous about that offense today.
I will say I don't think Keenan Allen's going to play, so that does give Williams a little bit of a bump that he'll be a primary target, and
Sure.
they'll probably see plays for Williams. But again, if you have another option, for example, I'm in one league where I have him, and I'm probably going to play Juju Smith-Schuster over him this week. That was actually another receiver I didn't mention. He's only 5,500, and he's going up against one of the worst slot corners in the league for the Colts, and I could see him having a surprise game. He has been in some situations defensively that weren't ideal for him, which was part of the problem. And I got a super cheap receiver I forgot about that is a sneaky play. Hunter Renfro's out this week, and Mac Hollins of the Raiders had 8 targets last week, caught 5 of them. To me, he feels a lot like my tight end play last week in Jeremy Johnson at 3,300. If he gets you 10 points, he was a massive play for you. And it's not hard to get 5 catches for 50 yards when Devontae Adams is on the other side of the field and you're playing the Titans. So speaking of injuries, without Hunter Renfrow, I could see him having a surprise game.
That's a good little sleeper pick there.
Oh, and there's also Tony's other favorite player besides Brandon Cooks. I did put your boy Dortch in one of my lineups.
I was just about to say, can I add one? Because nobody said Dortch.
Until Rondale Moore comes back.
Yep. No, they seem to like him. And Olave is only 4,500 for the Saints, and he had more air yards than anybody last week. He's got Winston throwing, so air yards don't always actually turn into actual catches, but they do seem to want to use him. So it seems like every week there's been a surprising rookie receiver. This could be the Olave week, possibly.
Zach says he can play Pierce or Edmonds over Williams at flex.
I think Pierce is the obvious choice there.
Yeah, I wouldn't touch Edmonds against Buffalo.
No, I wouldn't touch Edmonds until he gets a decent workload again.
Yep. Yeah, I actually put Mostert in one of my lineups because they seem to want to use him more.
That would feel just so wrong to me, though.
He's cheap.
Like, I would feel so dirty even hitting the button on that I couldn't do it. All right, let's move on to tight ends. Tony, hit us with some tight ends, buddy.
So I'm looking at tight ends and trying to find, again, some of those value plays. Don't really have anybody on here that I want to spend up on. Dallas Goedert is a guy that maybe jumps out at me a little bit. I also, I really like Irv Smith Jr. We saw his snap share increase in week 2. I'm gonna expect that to continue this week. He did pull in 8 targets last week, and so for his price point at 3,100, it's extremely tempting. And then another guy that I really, really like for the time being is Tyler Higbee. Tyler Higbee has been a target monster through the first 2 weeks. Week 1, 11 targets. Last week, 9 targets. The Rams like to run a lot of pretty much almost exclusively in the 3 receiver set. And with Van Jefferson out, Tyler Higbee is in that 3rd receiver role. So I think he also at 4,500 is a guy that you can look at getting into your lineups.
David?
Yeah, I agree with a lot of what you said. Irv Smith had a couple of long passes thrown his way last week. He didn't catch them, but they were scheming and making plays where they sent him deep, which caught me off guard. He's very athletic. He just doesn't stay healthy. And he is super cheap at 3,100. I want to go on the opposite end and say the one tight end I would definitely stay away from this week is Mark Andrews. The Patriots tend to scheme for a player they want to take out. And it just, when I look at that game, if I'm the Patriots, I don't want Andrews having a good game. So I could see him not being worth the money he would cost. I actually think Kelsey might be worth it. I can't see the Chiefs not putting up 35 points, and I can't see them doing that without Kelsey going off. So he is one guy that if you're going cheap at QB or running back, getting him in your lineup, I could see that making sense. But Irv Smith was my favorite cheap one. My other favorite tight end this week is Kyle Pitts, and that's my stack with Mariota. He's only 4,800. If you think about what he did last year, and he's only 4,800, he is the perfect play, I think, to do what Tony often loves to do and throw a tight end in the flex. When you build a really pretty lineup and you don't have a lot left, you might have put Irv Smith in there to keep it cheap. I bet you Pitts at 4,800 is a player you can consider. And if I'm Seattle, I'm almost more worried about Drake London at this point in some ways. And I think Pitts has been getting a lot of double coverage, and I don't know that Seattle can afford to do that. So he was my other tight end that I considered. I definitely Goddard, Higbee, Gerald Everett. Those are kind of the ones that I kept getting drawn back to also. And again, as a sneaky move, this could be Cole Kmet week. Again, I'm not betting my house on it, but this could be the week.
Ugh.
You're gonna have to take a lot of Pepto-Bismol to put Cole Kmet in your lineup.
He's good to put in your lineup with Mostert, Kyle.
Oh my gosh!
You can't touch any of the receivers on that Chicago offense. I mean, I think that you said 11 last week. The week before, I think they threw 20 something. So he's like 36 pass attempts on the season in 2 weeks. That's just anemic at best. I look. There's always one guy or two guys each week that surprise, but I don't expect it at all to be Cole Kmet.
I would do Kyle Pitts over Cole Kmet, yes.
100%.
Dude, yeah. Like, if Cole Kmet's a surprise, I'd just soon not have him in my lineup and be like, oh, hey, Cole Kmet did good this week.
Yep.
Then to have him in there and be like, well, I went too risky. And he sucked again. Okay. Let's hit Tommy's question, and then we'll go to our lineups here. Pick 3, half PPR: Bateman, Aguilar, Devontae Smith, Judy, Carter.
Well, I'd say that Devontae Smith jumps out at me first and foremost, just because I think that's going to be a high-scoring game, and he's been ramping up. So he would be my first choice. Judy being injured would be my last choice. They're not sure if he does play, how much he'll play, so I would take him off my list.
I think I saw before we got on here that he's actually going to play today, Judy.
Right, but they said they don't know how much he can handle. I think he's a risky play. So I would probably go with the 3 receivers, I believe. Carter's not a bad play. It seems like they use Breece Hall a little more. So I'd probably put Devonta Smith and Rashad Bateman in there first and then be picking between Carter or Aguilar.
What do you think, Tony?
Yeah, I don't disagree with that. I mean, I do think the guy that I have at the top of the list is Bateman. So I think Bateman and Devonta Smith. I would agree with David. I don't trust Nelson Aguilar, so I think it's between Judy and Michael Carter. Agree with everything that you just said. So I'm probably watching very closely that injury report on Judy because he's the guy that I would want to get into my lineup. I know he's had some limited practices, and what's he have, a rib or shoulder injury?
Shoulder. Yeah, that's what makes
a little bit concerning for a receiver. But I didn't, if he's going to be active for that game, I haven't read anything about them limiting his snap share or targets. But I don't disagree. I think if because it's a late game, it almost forces you to put Carter in your lineup.
So it sounds like we say Bateman, Smith, Carter is the consensus.
Yeah, I'm not touching Aguilar. All right. Zach says it's Cole Kmet season, baby. Not so far. Not so far. It's not.
I don't know what world you live in. That's quite a hot take there.
It's lineup time. It's lineup time, guys. Who's going first this week?
Who went first last week?
I did.
How'd that work out for you?
Not great.
Well, I'll lead it off because one of my
I can always go first if you want, just to prove I'm not copying off of you guys as you're sitting there rattling yours off.
Good plan. Let's hear it.
All right. So basically, we talked about all those different quarterbacks and stuff. The one I ended up landing on was Goff. Save a little bit of money, go with Goff, and I got Amon-Ra St. Brown as the stack there. I felt very good about that. The game that I really wanted a part of was that Detroit-Minnesota game. And so I made sure I got Goff and St. Brown, but I also got Jefferson and Irv Smith to get the other side of it. So I feel like if that doesn't turn into a shootout, my lineup's screwed. I get that. But if it does turn into a shootout, I got the best parts of it. I did end up with Montgomery and Pierce, both as my running backs. My third receiver was Allen Robinson, who I think, they're really trying to get more involved there in a potential high-scoring game with the Cardinals today. I think that could be interesting. And then my flex, I threw in Miles Sanders, who has a pretty good matchup against Washington today. And I normally don't like Miles Sanders, but he's been getting really good workloads lately and a really good matchup today. I think that could go really well. And then didn't have a lot left, so I ended up with the Jags defense against the banged-up Chargers. It was the cheapest one I could get with a decent matchup, honestly. So I feel pretty good about it. We'll see how it turns out. But definitely receiver was this position to spend up on this week, I thought.
Wow, Kyle, you have been paying attention to what Tony and I talk about. And
every time you all mentioned somebody in my lineup when you were going through your list earlier, I was just like, yes.
Well, I'm gonna go next because you're gonna hear a lot of similar names.
I was gonna say the same thing. Go ahead.
Okay. So I also did a Goff Amon-Ra St. Brown stack. Tony's aware of this. I wanted him on my teams in seasonal, never got him this year. So you might see Amon-Ra St. Brown in my lineup every week just because I'm sad I don't have him. So David
has PTSD from his keeper league where he kept CeeDee Lamb in the third over Amon-Ra St. Brown in the seventh.
Yeah, that might give me heartburn all year. So,
but I would have made the same decision last year though when you have to pick your keepers.
Right. I get it, but still it hurts. I went a little different than you. I did do Irv Smith at tight end, same reason as you. I'm in on that game, but I decided to tell a slightly different story and put Dalvin Cook as my running back with that. I really think that, yes, I love Jefferson, but I think Cook is going to be the focal point this week. And I'm picturing the Vikings having a lead, running it a lot. If the Lions take the lead, you're going to be looking good on me with Jefferson in the comeback. I also put Damian Pearson. As I said, you almost have to have one of him or Montgomery to make a lineup this week. My receivers, because I didn't do Jefferson, I was able to spread it around a little more. So I also went to that Eagles-Washington game, but I did A.J. Brown and Curtis Samuel. Samuel's been gold for me, and A.J. Brown just seems primed to blow up. And then I did put T. Higgins in my lineup at receiver as well. After all that's done, as I said, I had Irv Smith at tight end. I had a little more money at defense than I planned to, a little more than Jacksonville, who probably would have been my choice if I had less. But I put in the Raiders defense. The Titans lost Taylor Lewan at left tackle. Their defensive line is the one thing about that defense that seems to put pressure on people. And Tennessee has looked like one of the worst, if not the worst teams this season. So I thought getting that pass rush against them in a game I picture the Raiders leading being a good thing.
Yeah, the Raiders defense was one, but other than the Jags, the one I kept bouncing back and forth with was Houston against that freaking Chicago offense. I know we don't cover defenses before our lineups, but a couple of really cheap ones with good matchups this week. Tony, hit us with that lineup, bud.
So we're definitely all on the same page today. You've got to get in on that Detroit-Minnesota game. It's the highest game point total on the slate today, according to Vegas, at I think 52 or 52.5. I just went in a slightly different direction. Rather than Goff, I took Cousins, and I took Cousins with the double stack with Jefferson and Irv Smith Jr. It just seemed like an obvious play for me this week. Love Jefferson in a bounce back, and Irv Smith Jr. we've already talked about. What I also did do though is I did play Ross St. Brown as my comeback player on the Detroit side. So I've got 4 players going in that game. I also, like you, Kyle, I went with David Montgomery and Damian Pierce at my running back positions. Just too much value, and that really allowed me to get both Jefferson and Amon-Ra St. Brown. At my third receiver position, I went with my man Brandon Cooks at that $5,800 price point. Just love him this week in that matchup with Chicago, and so that also gets me some buy-in on that Houston-Chicago game, primarily on the Houston side. But I just do love Brandon Cooks at that $5,800 price point. And so in my flex, I had 4,500 left over. And for me, not because he's a tight end and I wasn't looking to go for a double tight end stack, but just because of that target share, I plugged in Tyler Higbee. I am going to look for him to continue to get somewhere in that 8, 9, 10 target range. And he is going to continue to function as that check down receiver, that number 3 receiver in this Rams offense against a very good matchup with that Arizona D. And like Dave, I also went with the Raiders on the defensive side. To me, that was the best defensive play on the day. Tennessee, I talked about this, I think Thursday or Wednesday night with you, Kyle, on one of the podcasts, but Tennessee is a totally different offense without A.J. Brown. Losing A.J. Brown completely transformed the dynamic in that offense, kills that passing game. Defenses are now loading up the box to stop Derrick Henry, and Tannehill just does not have anybody that he can lean on outside of Treylon Burks. So for me, the Raiders 0-2, desperate, need this win, seemed like the obvious play.
Who'd have thought the Raiders would start out 0-2 with that offense, though? My goodness. But yeah, dude, our lineups all look pretty similar. Dude,
Yeah,
I did so many combinations with the Cousins at QB, but I needed to get the rest of my lineup where I wanted it. I had to spend a little bit less and go with Goff.
Yeah, look, hey, either one of those games, like David's got Cook. We could see Dalvin Cook emerge, as the biggest beneficiary on this matchup, and we could see DeAndre Swift emerge as the biggest beneficiary in this matchup. But I think we all agree that Amon-Ra St. Brown is almost a must play in this game against that Minnesota defense, and what could be a shootout.
Yeah, I think everybody's going to have him on Raw in this week. So you almost have to just to keep up with the field, right? Like, it's like if I don't, I'm screwed.
What's interesting is I talked a lot about Waddle and Hill, but I couldn't get myself for what they cost to get them in because, like you guys said, I'm excited that the defensive backs are out, but I still think the Buffalo's defense as a whole could be more significant than what Baltimore was. And so it's going to be a different style game. But it was painful for me not to have Waddle in there.
Yeah. HGB says, Kyle loves Eagles running backs. This is not true.
You just love Miles Sanders.
I hate the Eagles with every fiber of my being, but if he can help me win a little money, then I'll stick him in there. All right,
James. I did do, just real quick, I did do a second lineup with Burrow because I like that. I didn't do that in our league, but I did do a second lineup with Burrow and Chase and Higgins and Brandon Cooks. And I was able to get in Fournette over Pierce with Montgomery. And I went with Logan Thomas at tight end and Treylon Burks in my flex with the Raiders D. So that was the second lineup I did. Just trying to get a second lineup out there with that with the double stack on the Cincinnati side.
Yeah, I did a lineup before I landed on this one. I did one with Burrow and Chase and Higgins.
Yeah,
and it didn't quite turn out as well as I'd hoped, but there are some pretty good lineups that you can do with that stack as well.
Definitely.
In fact, the Jets-Bengals game is the only one that I didn't get a piece of that I really wanted a piece of. I didn't get anybody in my lineup from that game, unfortunately. I tried to slide Mixon in there, and it just didn't work out. But
Gotcha.
that Vikings-Lions game was just – the force was too strong with that one. I couldn't get away from it.
Well, good luck, everybody. I hope that we are 1, 2, and 3 this week. And Kyle, I hope the Cowboys win tomorrow night.
Oh, me too, dude. It's freaking Giants. They better. I don't need another prime time debacle like the Bucs game.
AJ has a good question, I think, to finish off with.
AJ, I do that. Absolutely.
You guys ever look at spreads or over under for lineup help?
Absolutely. I mean, you gotta Vegas. They don't build those multi-billion-dollar casinos for nothing. I mean, these guys know what they're doing. This is where the professionals are at in terms of setting these lines. So I personally, yes, I'm looking not necessarily at. I guess I am incorporating the spreads also just to see on where they might be leaning on any specific team, but absolutely, for the point totals, yes.
I was gonna say, yeah, you have to see which ones have the highest point totals for sure.
Yeah, I would say.
Why is the KC line so short?
Before we get in that, I would say I actually used that this week. My opponents here, Kyle's using, and Tony, I believe, are both using Montgomery, and Tony's using Brandon Cooks, and I picture that being a low-scoring game between Houston and Chicago where neither team breaks 20 points, which is why I didn't use any players from that game. So I definitely do think that way. As for the KC line, I don't know if that's based on the Pittman injury. He's going to play, but I don't know if that's a factor, or no, they just don't know how to read the Colts at this point if they think KC is just going to blow them out.
Yeah, I don't know why they set what they set, but it can be useful in setting in lineups. So,
well, they did go with 50.5, so it's I think it's the third highest point total on the game on the week, with just after that Lions Vikings game and the Bills Dolphins.
All right, gentlemen. Good luck today.
Good luck, everyone.
I hope you lose to me, but otherwise, I hope you do okay. Thanks, everybody in the chat, for hanging out. And we'll see you guys soon on Spilled Coffee. Until then.
Thanks, fellas.
Good luck.